Hey guys, this is a very short video on your cardiac smooth muscle cells, cardiac action potential. I have drawn here two diagrams. This one represents your ventricular smooth muscle cells, ventricular myocyte, and this one is your SA node or AV nodal cells, also known as your pacemaker cells. There are quite a few differences between two of them, so let me mention one. For an example, here you can see this one is your resting potential of your ventricular myocyte is at -90, whereas your resting potential of your AV or AV node cells or your SA node cells are sinoatrial cell resting potential is at around -70. So this one is already much more near to your threshold. So to begin with, let's see. Here we can see is this one is your depolarization. This depolarization is taking place because of your sodium influx. As we know, sodium is a positive ion. So sodium gets inside the cells. So positive goes inside the cells, so it gets depolarized. It's much more positiveness inside the cells. Because of this voltage gated sodium channels, sodium gets inside the cells. The influx of this sodium inside sodium inside the cells makes it depolarize. The cell gets depolarized. This is known as phase 0. Phase 1, this one is phase 1, which is not that much of importance. So we're going to talk about your phase 2. Phase 2 is your plateau phase, also known as your plateau phase. Why this is known as plateau phase? Because as you can see, it gets stagnated. Neither it's going up, neither is going down. This is because there's no net gain in the polarity of a cell. What I mean by this is calcium gets inside the cells, which is a positive ion, and potassium, which is also a positive ion, that leaves the cells. So calcium, which is positive, potassium, which is positive. One leaves, one enters. So there's not much gain or loss in the inside the cell. So there's not much difference in the polarity of the cells. Neither not because it's losing, not because it's accepting much more of the potassium ions. So one positive leaves, one positive enters the cells. So calcium enters the cells, potassium leaves the cells. So that's why there's no difference taking place in the polarity of a cell. So that's why it's known as the phase 2 of the cardiac myocyte action potential, represented in this diagram, phase 2. Yeah. So, and the third phase, as we know, potassium is leaving the cell now. In the third phase, potassium leaves the cells much more. Of course, it was leaving also in the phase 2, but it continuously leaves the cells. So you are losing much more positive ions that are represented by potassium. So your action potential, it goes towards your negative side again, -90, towards your resting potential. Yeah. Because of loss of potassium leaving the cells, so it goes towards your resting potential. Then we have again we have this phase, which is represented by phase 4, not mentioned in many books, but this represent your diastole. So not much of action is taking place at this time. Because your ventricle muscle cells are at your resting position, you can say, in other words. Then again, the same thing happens. So this is a upstroke. This is your uphill, represented by sodium, which is a positive ion, getting inside the cells. This one, phase 2, plateau phase, this is because of your calcium leaving the cells and potassium entering the cells. Both of them are positive, so that's why it becomes plateau phase. Neither is going up, neither is going down. Then we have your downhill. This is because you are losing potassium. I mean, potassium is leaving the cell, which is a positive ion. So that's why it's again reached, it will reach towards your -90 millivolts. Yeah. So this was your action potential, which happens in your ventricular muscles. But ventricular muscles, as we know, are different from your SA node or AV nodes. Cells, which are also known as pacemaker of your heart. So what happens in a action potential of a SA node or AV node? What's the basic difference between those and of your ventricular cells. The basic difference is here you can see, as I already mentioned, your resting membrane potential, your resting membrane potential of your SA node or AV node is at around minus 70 millivolts. So this is much more near to the threshold. So it can get much more easily triggered. So in the SA node or AV node, what happens is we are not talking about sodium. There's no place for sodium channels, sodium ion in your SA node, AV node. As we talked about, the initial phase, the phase 0 of ventricular myocyte was because of sodium. But in this case, it's because of calcium. Calcium gets inside the cells and potassium leaves the cells. So simple, uphill, downhill. Calcium gets inside the cells, it makes it much more positive. Potassium leaves the cells, it brings it back towards your minus 70 resting potential. That's all. Thank you.